This is a GK Media podcast.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talks with myself, Garry Kelly of GK Media, and Niall Leyden of Atlantic Wealth Management. And we have a very, very special episode for you this week. Probably the most important episode that you can listen to heading into 2026, because one of the most talked about topics. We've gotten in hundreds of requests from listeners asking us to try and get more information for them about this topic. It's coming in on the 1st of January 2026 into Ireland. It is auto-enrolment. And fair play to Niall. He has teed up one of the top people in the country who can speak to us on this issue. And it is the one and only Aaron Gaynor, who's president of the Irish Institute of the Pensions Management Institute, which is the primary provider of pensions education. So Aaron, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Not at all, guys. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to having a chat.
So Niall, if we can first start with you, can you explain to us why auto-enrolment is coming in on the 1st of January?
Well, I'd like to echo, Garry, your sentiments in terms of welcoming Aaron to Wealth Talks. It's a huge honour and privilege to have you here, Aaron. I've known Aaron for the best part of 20 years in our professional capacity, giving advice to entrepreneurs and business owners all over the country. And, you know, in terms of the context and the landscape and the backdrop for auto-enrolment, I mean, in Ireland at the moment, we're facing essentially it's like a pensions time bomb. People are living longer. So with life expectancy increasing, there's more and more pressure on the state pension. So in Ireland at the moment, 1 in 3 private sector workers have no pension at all. You know, Ireland is the last in the OECD of the countries to introduce automatic mandatory savings. So, you know, you have a combination. And from a business owner perspective, I mean, there's a lot going on here with rising costs, minimum wages, the budget's out recently. We're coming very close to the end of November. This has been introduced on the 1st of January 2026, which is weeks around the corner. But if you look at the ratio, Garry and Aaron knows this, you know, the ratio of people working to the number of people in retirement, at the moment, that's somewhere between 4 and 5 to 1. So we have 4 people, there's 3 of us and 1 other working for every 1 in retirement. That's going to fall, Garry, to 2 to 1. So
oh, wow.
Auto-enrolment will ensure that there's participation on a national savings habit. But Aaron and I and you and we will talk, I suppose, around pros and cons and I suppose swings and roundabouts and how it's going to work. And some of the questions, I know, Aaron, I've listened to some of your webinars and conversations. The questions that are coming in are all very relevant for business owners. So I think for our listeners here today, they're going to be massive benefit in hearing what Aaron is going to share with us. Aaron, thanks again for joining us.
So Aaron, I was speaking to a business owner this morning, and we were talking, as Niall said there, we were talking about all the rising costs for employers with inflation and the minimum wage, and look, insurance is constantly going up, and you know, electricity isn't going easy. Rates have gone up a lot in Galway City alone for business owners. And now there's, besides bank holidays and sick days being brought in by the government, they're now bringing in auto-enrolment as well. She said to me, I don't know what to do. I've no idea what I'm supposed to do. So how is this actually going to be implemented, and when are we supposed to implement it?
So the start date for auto-enrolment, or as it's been called, is My Future Fund. That's going to be the 1st of January. For when people are running their first payroll in the new year, that's when it's going to happen. So there has been some information that's been pushed out by the government. You may have seen the ice cream ads towards the end of the summer there, which had the kind of contribution amounts and the top-up amount from the government. They have been engaging with businesses via some of the kind of industry working groups and so on. Information might be probably a little bit light for business owners, and obviously it's a particularly busy time of year for many businesses now. We're kind of in, and for individuals, it's tax year end for many individuals as well. So people have a lot of stuff going on. They may not have seen all of the kind of government promotions, the advertisements in relation to My Future Fund. But my understanding is that activity now is going to ramp up over the coming weeks, to make sure more people and more business owners can kind of see, be made more aware, I suppose, of auto-enrolment and what's to happen. The kind of latest that we would have is there will be a portal that employers will have to register on. That portal will be live in December at some time, and through that then they will have to go in and look at their staff and register their business for auto-enrolment. So we again, as an industry here, I'm speaking on behalf, I suppose, of the pensions industry. There's been lots of information that's kind of come out, but there still are some questions that need to kind of be answered. And again, particularly for businesses, and I would say then smaller businesses that maybe don't have a HR department, or people who look after payroll for them, or they might have to do this sort of stuff themselves. It really then comes down to the owner of the business to kind of figure all this sort of stuff out. So there is a lot to kind of process for people. Again, I would probably just say that there is reasonably good information on the internet there, gov.ie. Lots of the different pension providers have good content and information now on auto-enrolment. And again, if people have financial advisors or financial brokers, you can always reach out to your broker or your pension provider to get more information if you have one of those too.
I understand now why the auto-enrolment is coming in. And there's been talk of it for the last few years, and it's been kind of kicked down the road by government. But now it seems that it's coming in 1st of January, no matter what. But as you say there, like the portal won't be ready until December. So do you think the country is ready for the 1st of January?
It's a good question. I mean, the original date was supposed to be the 30th of September, and it was pushed back. Now, the department said they would have been ready to go on the 30th of September. But again, understandably, that's, you're kind of making a change in the middle of a business year, in the middle of a tax year. It might have been very difficult, to maybe land that on industry and businesses to manage. So by pushing it to the 1st of January, I suppose, look, we are giving people a little bit more time to plan, a little bit more time to look at their budgets and where they're going to be allocating money, next year, and that this is the time of year maybe where many businesses are maybe having to think about 2026. So I think the 1st of January will happen. I agree that it's going to be tight. It'll be a busy December in terms of trying to get things organised. But I suppose it's really important to kind of say at this point, like December is the kind of a portal registration period that we're aware of. The department's going to be doing what they're calling a Lookback at the beginning of December to establish who is eligible for auto-enrolment. So, you'll be eligible for auto-enrolment if you're an employee, if you're aged between 23 and 60, and you're earning between 20,000 and 80,000 euros a year from one or your combined employments. That's who's going to be eligible for auto-enrolment. Anybody who's in a pension scheme or making pension contributions via payroll, and that's a really important one here. So it's not enough to just be making pension contributions. It has to be done via payroll. So anybody who has a contribution via payroll in a 13-week period, which begins on the 1st of, let's say, the 1st of December. So we're looking back for 3 months effectively from the 1st of December. So we're in the middle of that look back period at the moment. So that will be done at the beginning of December. And anybody who doesn't have a pension contribution via payroll, who's a Schedule E employee, will be auto-enrolled in January. So again, key message from me today is we're running out of time here. You really have maybe weeks from today to really have a look at this and do salary deducted pension contributions for your staff if that's what you're choosing to do in terms of a retirement solution for your employees.
I think in terms of Aaron, might it be beneficial just for our listeners in terms of simplifying this, looking at what it is, what it costs, and what smart employers, in terms of helping our listeners. We're all business owners here. So Aaron, might it be a good idea just to, let's talk and walk and step through between now and 2035, how it's going to incrementally, the percentages. Are you happy enough to share that with our listeners?
Of course, yeah. So from next year, the employer contribution rate will be 1.5%. The employee contribution rate will be 1.5%, and then the government will do a top up of 0.5%. So it'll be 3.5% in total. Employers must match their employees' contribution amount. So if you do have somebody who's eligible for auto-enrolment and will be auto-enrolled, you must match the contribution, and it's a percentage of gross salary. So it'll start off at 1.5% for the employer and the employee. It'll go up then over a 10-year period, and eventually it'll be 6% for the employer, 6% for the employee, and 2% top up from the government. So while it's kind of starting off at a relatively low amount, it will increase over time up to 6%. So that's another 6% of a charge on top of salary for your employees. So it will be, not an insignificant sum. And even like if we're thinking about 2026, it's another 1.5% that that businesses are going to have to find, that goes on top of the cost of running their payroll. So that's how it's going to roll out over the next few years. If we think about workforces and standard rate taxpayers and higher rate taxpayers, like there's differences there for those people too. So the government top up kind of equates to around 25% of the total contribution for auto-enrolment. Somebody who's saving into a pension themselves today, if they're a standard rate taxpayer, they're entitled to tax relief at 20%. So obviously 20% is lower than 25%. But a higher rate taxpayer will be getting tax relief on a pension contribution of 40%. There's potentially a disadvantage to somebody being auto-enrolled if there was an option there for them to be in a pension scheme. And again, what I'd see from looking across the industry, many employers where they have set up pension provision for their staff, and pension provision is a great way to kind of attract and retain staff. They probably pay more than the 1.5%. So there's many schemes and many pension arrangements that are enforced today where the employer and the employee are paying, a lot more than 1.5%. So there will be, it's an important thing to look at to, if you don't have a retirement savings solution in place for your staff and you're looking at your costs and you're looking at, your benefits packages, I would, encourage people to kind of consider, okay, well, is 1.5% enough for people to save for retirement? Because again, although it will go up, people who stay at the auto-enrolment levels of contributions, may not have large pension pots, especially in the first few years when auto-enrolment rolls out.
That's a really important point, Aaron. I think, in terms of ultimately what are pensions, and beginning with the end in mind, and ultimately, we were looking there very recently. I know we had discussed the Financial Planning Standard Boards and the global CFE body recommending that people should save somewhere between 15 and 20% combined for a comfortable retirement at age 65. Whilst auto-enrolment is certainly a positive and its progress, it's probably the floor. Would that be fair to say, Aaron?
Look, again, I'd be very supportive of auto-enrolment. I'm delighted to see it's being introduced, and I think the pensions industry as well. I work in the pensions industry. Like the pension is very welcoming of auto-enrolment, and it's great to see that there's action taking place now to address coverage issues. And again, if you think about this in the medium term, if people kind of get used to this and get used to saving for their retirement, and they may develop an interest in where their money is being invested and how their fund is performing and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a good entry for a worker into kind of financial planning needs and maybe being a bit more financially literate, because it'll happen by default. You will be dealing with your pension by default. So that's a kind of real positive thing. There are limitations with the scheme itself. You can only take your benefits out at age 66. The opting out, you can opt out of the scheme if you don't want to pay into it. You can opt out after months 6 and 7, but you will be re-enrolled every 2 years. So the only way to get out if you want to stay out of auto-enrolment really is to join a pension scheme. And again, one of the major limitations we'd see with auto-enrolment is there's no advice provided to anybody who's joining the auto-enrolment scheme, so they wouldn't get the benefit of speaking to an advisor or a provider at the point when they're joining a scheme to maybe consider what the best investment strategy might be for them, or how much money they want to save, or if they wanted to save a little bit more. You're not allowed to save any more than the 1.5% contribution amount of your salary. So it's quite inflexible in terms of the contributions. And again, from working in the pension industry now for 20 years, we do see a real need for people to make additional contributions at various different times in the year, or people get pay rises or change jobs and they want to save a little bit more when they can. So that kind of flexibility isn't in the auto-enrolment system. And now again, it may come in time, but in the kind of first phase of this, they won't have that flexibility. And then at the point of retirement as well. So you can only get your benefits at age 66, which is the state pension age. We'd see from looking across the book of people retiring every year in Ireland, there is a big demand for retirement flexibility. Some people take benefits in their 50s or when they're 60, sometimes after age at 66, they could do it at 70 or 75. So that's just that flexibility really in terms of where people are with their lifestyle and what their kind of unique needs are in retirement, unless you kind of decide, okay, well, I'm definitely going to want to retire at age 66 and whatever, that kind of bit of flexibility is probably missing from the system.
And I think that ties very nicely in, Garry. If you think of some of the conversations, and I know you were at a couple of presentations that Atlantic Wealth Management have done in recent weeks and months in terms of having that conversation with employers and with employees in terms of, what's important to clients, the flexibility, understanding how it works, what are the nuances? I mean, it's hugely positive. There's going to be 700,000 or 800,000 people in Ireland. I mean, it's a national movement.
Yeah.
Aaron has very kindly stepped us through, the incremental increases from 3.5%. And we were talking there recently at a presentation in Galway, Aaron, where when you get to 2035 and onwards, when you have the 6% from the employer, 6% from the employee and 2% from the state, that you're up to 14%. And one of the business owners, or there was a fairly robust conversation had, Aaron, in terms of, on €1 million payroll, that was an additional cost of 60,000 was one school of thought. And then there was another very strong school of thought saying, well, look, this is really good news, because in terms of client retention, looking after, going back to the ageing population, life expectancy increasing, pressure on the state pension, there's lots of tax benefits in terms of, the retirement planning and pensions. But it evolved into a really roundtable discussion, Aaron, around auto-enrolment and what fits best. It'll suit some people. Others then want that flexibility. They want the advice. They want the personalised, maybe whether it's an Atlantic Wealth or a financial planner. There's no one size fits all. I would wholeheartedly agree with Aaron's sentiment around this being hugely positive for families and employees and employers. And yes, there's stress and there's a lot of anxiety around the costs and the nuances around payroll and getting this implemented. But it's like a lot of things in life. A year from now, it'll be history and it'll be something else. This will happen. It is the 1st of January 2026. Preparation is key. Getting advice is key. Aaron, we've got a good number of questions, some of which I can certainly answer. But what Garry and I were just saying is, if it was okay, we might there was a couple of questions come in from our listeners in the last couple of weeks. Garry, if you'd like to maybe share them with Aaron and we can...
Okay, so when do I need to submit pension contributions to the DC plan to avoid enrolment in MFF? So again, if we even just break down the acronyms there for people.
Sounds like somebody has a pension scheme already. MFF is My Future Fund, I'm guessing. So that's a business there that has a pension scheme in place already, which is a real positive. There are, for some reason or another, there may be groups of employees who, for some reason, are just not in the pension scheme. So if you've new joiners or if you've people historically who just haven't joined the scheme, they will be auto-enrolled in January unless there's a salary deducted contribution, it goes through payroll, not necessarily a deduction from the employee themselves. The employer or the employee can make a contribution to a pension, but it has to be done through payroll. So this will have to be done in November, Garry. Again, as I said earlier, there will be a look back period in December, and they'll look back from the 3 months from the beginning of December. If there's no pension contribution via payroll in that 13-week period, then that person will be auto-enrolled in January. That'll be the case even if they make a December contribution. So there will be people here who are joining a business for the first time in the coming weeks, and there's already a pension scheme in place, and they join and there's a deduction in December. That person will still be auto-enrolled in January, and there will be a facility for the employer to reclaim a refund, because that's called an overlapping contribution. So there will be refunds for any kind of overlapping contributions. But if that question there from one of your listeners, if they already have a pension plan in place, it's just to make sure everybody that they want to bring into the plan is in the plan in November.
Thanks, Aaron. Question number 2, and this came in quite a bit. Who's excluded from auto-enrolment?
It's a really good question, Niall. So anybody listening today who is self-employed or, maybe Schedule D income taxpayer and has a business with employees, like the self-employed person or the person paying Schedule D income tax, won't be auto-enrolled. Similarly, company directors, if you have a controlling director in a company directors won't enrolled either, but they say non-shareholding directors may be, if they're paying, I think it's Class A PRSI, those there may be non-kind of controlling directors paying Class A PRSI. So if you are one of those people and you're listening today, have a look at your PRSI class. But typically, if you're a controlling director, you're not paying you're paying Class S PRSI, I think. So those people wouldn't be auto-enrolled. I don't think any of the public service are going to be auto-enrolled. And then the key one here is anybody who is in a pension. With, again, as I said, salary or payroll deduction contribution in this look back period won't be auto-enrolled.
Another common one, Garry, there is, what if I have my own pension that I'm paying into myself? Will I be auto-enrolled?
Again, that's great. That's somebody saving for retirement, so long as you meet the criteria, which is you're an employee, you're aged between 23 and 60, and you're earning €20,000 a year or more. Even if you're saving into a PRSA, which is a personal retirement savings account, or a personal pension from your own bank account, there's no way for the department to kind of see that pension contribution. So they'll do a look back. They won't see a salary deducted pension contribution for you, and you'll be auto-enrolled.
And would you recommend that people kind of maintain both? If you're into the habit of, we'll say, saving for a pension for the last number of years, and now the auto-enrolment will become part of your payment, is it good to keep the original pension still going, do you think? Or if people can, I suppose, afford to do so?
Yeah, affordability will come into it for many people. Like, again, if you're already in the habit of saving for retirement, that's great. I mean, the first thing I'd say to anybody who's in that situation there is maybe just speak to your employer. So if you're already saving something yourself personally, businesses have to do this in January, so that there's no getting away from auto-enrolment. So there will be an employer contribution towards a pension arrangement for people, either via My Future Fund or through a pension scheme. So I'd say first step there would just be have a conversation with your employer. Your employer may be happy to facilitate, payroll deducted pension contributions on your behalf, and you could pay, you could take out a new pension, or you could potentially continue to pay into your existing pension arrangement. It just needs to be done via your employer. There'll be plenty of people, I guess, that'll be auto-enrolled and just will think, okay, well, I want to save more for retirement. The 1.5% contribution for me isn't enough, or I'm already used to saving more than that. So you will be able to, be included in auto-enrolment and contribute to your own kind of personal pension arrangement. The key thing there is really just, if you want to have both, you have to keep your own one separate and coming out of your post-tax pay, if you know what I mean. So out of your own bank account. If it goes through your employer, you'll be kicked out of auto-enrolment.
Aaron, another very popular one in terms of the opt-in, opt-out. There's two parts to this question. So can I get a refund of employer contributions if I have high staff turnover? And how does the opt-in, opt-out work?
So much start with the second question, Niall, which is opt-in, opt-out. So anybody outside of the qualifying criteria. So we just said somebody out, 20 years of age and not 23, or somebody earning €15,000 a year and not €20,000 a year. So somebody like that, or somebody who's age 61, they can opt in, and if they opt in, the employer has to pay an employer contribution. So that can be done. In terms of opting out, I kind of touched on it earlier. You can opt out after months 6 and 7, so there will be a facility there to opt out, but you'll be re-enrolled in 2 years' time. So you're going to have to, and then you'll be in for another 6 months. So every 2 years, you'll be in for 6 months again. So again, assuming you're eligible for auto-enrolment. So the only way to stay out, if you want to stay out, is really just to contribute to kind of a workplace pension arrangement. And then the other question, Niall, you'll have to give it to me again there.
So the other question then is, can I get a refund of employer contributions, Aaron, if I have high staff turnover?
No, so somebody with high staff turnover, what will happen there is, we get somebody joining the workforce in January, they'll be auto-enrolled, they'll be in the scheme for say 5 months, the employer contribution will be paid, the employee contribution will be paid, they leave and they join a different business or a different company. There's no refund of the employer contributions there. So anything you're paying in as an employer into My Future Fund will remain in the kind of pension pot for your staff member. It's one positive for the worker here in terms of no matter what company you work for, if you're in My Future Fund, it'll be the same retirement pot for you. So you can work in company A and then go to company B and company C, and it's always just your pot, and all the kind of employer contributions that you collect along the way in your working career will be in that pot. And again, from having conversations with different employers over the course of the year this year, they'd be looking at things like that, and companies that have a high turnover. That would be a kind of a difference to a company pension arrangement. If you're paying into a company pension arrangement, the rules of many kind of company pension schemes would be that there's a refund of employer contributions up to a period of up to 2 years if staff are leaving your employment. So that's kind of maybe an advantage of having a company arrangement in place, that you will get a refund for any business that would have seasonal workers or high turnover. You could have them in your DC plan or your company pension instead. And if they left, then you'd potentially get your employer contributions back.
That's fantastic. Garry, I was just going to share with you both. I mean, the conversation that we had last week with business owners here in the West and Midlands is the alternative to auto-enrolment. So if you have employees, say, we'll just say on a salary of maybe 50 or 60,000, weighing up the pros and cons of an alternative. Any thoughts that you'd like to share with us in that regard, Aaron?
I think advice is crucial here, Niall. So many kind of businesses don't have, HR departments or, people looking after staff benefits or whatever that may be. And I think a financial advisor, a financial broker is kind of have a key role to play here in terms of making sure businesses have all the information that they need. So there are alternatives, as you've said. There's lots of different types of pension arrangements that somebody could put in place for their staff, and they may do so, in order to attract staff or retain staff. It is a particularly competitive market at the moment, and again, in terms of attracting talent, because we're close to full employment. So there are alternatives. If you already have a plan, I would just say to reach out to your provider to make sure that you're having a conversation to say, okay, I have a plan in place. Is everybody in the plan? Are there any gaps? Are there any rules with my pension scheme which means that somebody can't join it for 6 months or a year? Because there were plenty of pension schemes where you had to be through probation, and that's a question I get asked all the time. Will somebody on probation be auto-enrolled? They absolutely will be auto-enrolled if they meet the qualifying conditions that we spoke about earlier. There's plenty of pension schemes, again, that have rules like that. You join the scheme after 6 months service, or you join the scheme after you've passed your probation period or something like that. And again, if you're an employer running a pension scheme, you may not want to be also making contributions into My Future Fund as well at the same time. So somebody who has a plan, I'd say, make sure you're talking to your provider, you're clear on what the eligibility is for your staff and joining that pension scheme. You're identifying if there's anybody outside the scheme for whatever reason, because if they're outside, then you'll suddenly find yourself, you'll be doing payroll and making deductions and contributions towards a scheme with a pension provider, and you'll also be running My Future Fund alongside it, and that may be a bit clunky, and people mightn't want to do that.
So what's the first thing people should do? Should they go and talk to their accountant, or should they go, is there pension brokers out there, or do you go direct to a company that does pensions? What should be the next step?
We're speaking mainly to SMEs here today. I'd say if you have a scheme already, definitely talk to your provider about your pension scheme that you already have in place, and make sure that you're kind of covering off on those things we just spoke about there in terms of eligibility and people outside the scheme and any kind of rules that might need to be amended. If you don't have anything in place today, I would say if you found a financial advisor or a financial broker. So again, there's a quick Google there will give you access to lots of advisors and brokers that operate in the market. The massive role here for advisors here to make sure that not only the employer has guidance in terms of what arrangement might suit them best, because again, an employer might say, well, look, I'd like to have a pension scheme for some of my key staff, and I'm happy with auto-enrolment for some of my other staff, or for my seasonal workers, or whatever that might be. That there are companies who want their own pension plan. There's companies who just want auto-enrolment, and there's companies that want both. So I'd really recommend speaking to somebody who can give you a little bit of guidance in terms of what a good fit could be. And then as well, depending on your staff and their earnings, and if they're 20% tax rate payers or 40%, and weighing that up against what an employer is prepared to pay in terms of an employer contribution to a pension, you can get advice for each of your staff if you're reaching out to a financial advisor or a financial broker on that. Key step would just be to speak to your provider if you have a pension, and if you don't, I'd reach out to an advisor or a broker.
The key piece in all of this is advice, and getting best advice, and not being transactional. I mean, at a national level, this is happening, this is coming. This is live on the 1st of January 2026, and the conversations we're having, say, in Atlantic Wealth with business owners and families and employees is very tailored, very bespoke. It's looking at, because simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and there's a lot of people talking about My Future Fund and PRSAs and master trusts, and for people running businesses, I mean, they're juggling so much. So what we try and do is keep this very, very simple, and look at it, on a business on a case-by-case basis. So it's very much taking that collaborative approach, working hand in glove with business owners, accountants, and their payroll and their HR, and putting tailored solutions in place. And Aaron, you're so right. I mean, there's so many positives, but anxiety levels are increasing. People are panicking. What you want is a steady hand, somebody that you trust and like and respect. Aaron, to have you here with us today, to try and take a little bit of anxiety away from people and answer some of these questions, to say, look, a problem shared is a problem halved. It's not necessarily a problem, but just with the clock ticking, I thought it timely that the three of us come together and have this conversation. So, Aaron, thanks a million for your time. Anything else, Garry, that you wanted to?
No, I definitely do feel more aware now what needs to be done. It's a complicated process, but I think, as you said, we need to go out there now as employers and start having conversations with the experts out there and get a plan in place, and not kind of kick it down the road and hope it'll all just sort itself out come the 1st of January.
Well, you're lucky. You're well looked after. But there's a lot of businesses around the country that just need that little bit of help and guidance and support. And for all of our listeners, we have a lot of resources available. We have webinars, we have presentations. The advice is here. Aaron, you're doing a wonderful job. I mean, it's brilliant the way you're just helping educate people, because pensions, you go back to, I suppose, us growing up and our parents, it's just an area that a lot of people just are not still comfortable talking about. And to be fair, what you're doing there is just helping simplify it all. So
yeah, and to commend Aaron as well, because you're one of the troops out there who's actually giving us the education and messaging and explaining things to us.
Correct.
You're on the ground doing the work and the heavy lifting for all of us. So thank you so much from, an employer's perspective on things. It is appreciated. Communication, which we certainly learned during COVID, was key. Clarity, transparency. So you're doing that. So thank you so much.
And we'll include all of this to all of our listeners out there and keep your questions coming in. But we're going to include all of this in our show notes, links to all of the resources available. Aaron, any final thoughts, any final comments for our listeners?
Unfortunately, I'd encourage everybody to act today. So if make hay while the sun shines here. If you've listened to the end here, thanks for listening in. And if you are one of these people who thinks that they might need to have a conversation with somebody to see if there's if you need to look at whether you're going to be auto-enrolled or not, or whether your staff are or not, I just say as quick as you can, because we're unfortunately now we're up against the clock in terms of the industry is incredibly busy, adding thousands of people to pension schemes. There's thousands of people that taking out new pensions and stuff like that. So we're down to the last number of days here, really, where you can do something and for it to be done in time, really.
We're here to help. Brilliant. Aaron, thank you very much. Garry.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks a
Pleasure,
million,
guys.
gents.
Thanks a million.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Cheers.
So there you go. That is this week's episode of Wealth Talks. Hopefully you got a little bit more clarity on what is happening with auto-enrolment, why it is happening, and how you go about implementing it in your organisation. As Niall said, we'll have further links and information of various resources that are available to you in the show notes of the description of this episode. And as always, our door is open. If there's anything else we can help you with, or if you want further clarity on anything, feel free to get in touch. But for today, thanks so much for listening.
This is a GK Media podcast.